Hello, I will lead you in this video to the tool on our webpage, Equimov. In the Equimaps interactive tool, by clicking, as usual, interface and then into the StatPlanet software, I want to show you how the Holistic Health Index looks like. So if you click on the middle bar and see the equity zones chapter of health equity indicators, there's only one indicator, which is equity zones. Now, let me explain to you how this has been done. We've divided the countries in the world in 4 categories. One we call deficit. Those are the countries that in any given year, and this is shown since 1960 till 2012, have had GDP per capita, that is income, below the minimum threshold of GDP per capita of the 14 health, feasible and sustainable models. We've estimated that minimum threshold as the lowest GDP per capita of those 14 countries, whereby no country ever in all these years has been able to have the life expectancy of those models which are feasible and sustainable for all, including the survival rates at any given age. So that we call deficit, and here is coded as 1. So here you would see, let's put it in diverging colors, and let's put it as a bad thing to be red, and let's use 4 colors. So this would be the red countries. Those are deficit countries in 1962, and you can see how it has been evolving throughout the years in a while. The second group of countries we have classified are those countries we call under the equity curve. Those are the countries that have GDP per capita above that minimum threshold, which I mentioned earlier, but below the upper threshold. Now, how do we define the upper threshold? That is the symmetric point of the lower threshold when the midpoint is the world's average GDP per capita, in fact, world's weighted average GDP per capita. That we call the equity curve, and that is in our analysis the ethical distribution of resources, as below that curve every person in the world would be enabled to enjoy that feasible and sustainable life expectancy. So that we call the equity curve. Then we have those countries with GDP per capita above that upper threshold, okay, and that we call surplus. And yet we have a 4th category, which we call excess accumulation. This is probably the most difficult to understand. We have identified the threshold of excess accumulation by taking away the excess GDP per capita from the country with highest GDP per capita and gradually those under that one, so that by cutting off that excess GDP per capita, we could have enough resources to satisfy the deficit of those living in the deficit area. So that would be, let's say, the minimum ethical redistribution, that excess accumulation to not be increasing at very high levels the income of some countries, but guaranteeing those dignity and conditions for the countries now living under the minimum threshold, that is in the deficit zone. So this is how it looks like. You need to adjust here slightly the threshold so that you will see all of the categories. This is probably one of the limitations of StatPlanet. Every time you need to adjust your legend. So there you are. This would be countries coded 1, which are deficit. This would be countries coded 2, which are equity. This would be countries coded 3, which are surplus. And this would be countries coded 4, which are the surplus, the excess accumulation countries. So let's have a look at the video, how this looks like. You see in red those countries in the deficit zone. So China went up in the 90s, late 90s, and here's how it looks like. Only Nicaragua in Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa, with the exception of some oil-producing countries, obviously North Africa, and then Nigeria, Gabon, Cameroon, and then Angola, Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa. Then you have India still, and Pakistan, Afghanistan, some of the Central Asian republics. Unfortunately, Syria is now in the zone because of the terrible situation lately. And then these are the countries. Why Vietnam, which is one of our model countries, is there because we took the average of Vietnam and Sri Lanka. Vietnam was the lowest, but it's very close to that, to the equity zone. This is, and then Papua New Guinea. This is how the world looks like. Excess accumulation in Canada, the US, most of Central and Northern Europe, and then Australia and Japan, and some of the Arab Emirates here. Surplus in Italy, Spain, Portugal, Greece, or Mediterranean, and then the Arabian Peninsula, Oman, and then Thailand. But these are countries with no data, so there's no data. The color looks like the surplus zone, that's very far from that. And then you have the equity zone, really, with all of Latin America, except Nicaragua, and then North Africa, and then Russia and Eastern Europe, and China, and Iran, and then South West Africa. So that's how the world looks like according to equity zones. And you can also see it here. For instance, this is an interesting way to look at it, because then you can see which countries have been shifting from one zone to another one.